Welcome to The Screen Queen, the show where I'll be talking about your favorite TV show or your favorite movie. You'll just have to listen to find out. This is your host, Samantha Parrish. Hello there, and welcome back to the show. As always, I am your host, your lean, mean media queen, Samantha Parrish. So after I finished Heartbreak Ridge, there's a thought that came to my mind. Military movies definitely changed in the 80s. When you look at the beginning years of the 80s and the military movies that came out, there was a definite game changer to make things more comedic or dramatic. It became a lot more than just action. I think some of the examples on top of my head is An Officer and a Gentleman, which is one of the films I've never seen, but I've always heard referenced about a good structure movie of someone getting their shit together. And I did a whole episode about the Rambo movies with how the game changer with PTSD being introduced to explain what goes on for a lot of military veterans are struggling through that, and Rambo became that voice. And then you have something like Stripes that made you piss yourself from laughing so much at a military film. And then you have Heartbreak Ridge, which kind of like combined everything together. By all means, Heartbreak Ridge isn't a perfect military film, but it is still a good military film. I would say that it's one of the very few films that Clint Eastwood did that is a standout military character to me. For certain reasons that it doesn't follow the same cliches of other military films, since it is trying to break into the decade with making a military film that wasn't trying to be what the other films were trying to do. And to Clint Eastwood's credit, he does deliver a different type of film that never felt like it was the same thing. And this is one of the few films that he has written and directed before he would, make a whole fucking career out of it. But this was one of those gems that you really got to see something that wasn't a cowboy or Harry Callahan. Heartbreak Ridge isn't a perfect film, but there are some things worth talking about for this film that still somehow manages to make a mark as a military film. So here we go. This is Heartbreak Ridge. So for those out there that have never heard of the film Heartbreak Ridge, I got you covered. I got the synopsis for you, so you know what this film is about. The film follows a Marine gunnery named Thomas Highway, who is the pain and many of the assholes of so many military officials. They would rather have it that Highway would just retire, but unfortunately the dude is just cannot stop getting himself in trouble left and right and still finds his way out of every scuffle and kerfuffle. However, they do give him the ultimate test to train a whole bunch of deadbeats into being top-notch Marines. It's like if the cast of Stripes just walked into this film. That's basically what he's working with. And the Marines are not too thrilled to work with him either, and they are trying whatever the fuck they can to get him out. But on top of Thomas Highway trying to train people that seem untrainable, he is trying to somehow, some way make some amends with his ex-wife that he still has feelings for. There's a lot of deep dives into this film with giving a part of the military that shows what the outside is like. And I haven't seen too many films that really tackle the hard relationships. I can think atop my head of some films where you did have that. There's a whole show called Army Wives where you had women that were hoping that their husbands were going to be okay, and how do they handle things back at home? How do they take care of the children? How do they do all these things? And there are other things like A League of Their Own where that's also a film that's not military, but you do see how it affected the women on the baseball team, or just like, is my husband going to come back home alive or in a box? This film is the most emotional way that you really do get to feel for those relationships. I would say it's like a multi-layer film where you have a lot of those aspects of what the military does in a working aspect, but then outside of it too. Not many films do that, and I really appreciate it for that. I can respect a film a lot that's not going to just be a one-trick pony, that it is willing to dive deep into different territories. That's why I mentioned earlier that with all the films I mentioned, with An Officer and a Gentleman, Stripes, Rambo, Heartbreak Ridge is like the combination of them all, where it is equal parts comedy, tragedy, romance, and action. That's kind of a hard balance to have 4 different genres in a film where it doesn't feel like it's overtaxing and doesn't lose the identity of being a military film. But there are 2 very important reasons why this film is called Heartbreak Ridge. I did some digging into what other military stories come out of this film, despite the fact that Heartbreak Ridge does not take creative liberties to use a real story and work around it like some other films have done, where you kind of get based off a true story. But the Heartbreak Ridge kind of carries on a lot of certain stories in the same guise of another film that I talked about called Copland, where Copland is not based on a true story, but it does take the true stories and kind of put them together to echo to that time period. Heartbreak Ridge echoes the time period of the Korean War. Even though we do get the title earlier in the film, where Thomas Highway has been asked by a lieutenant where he went to college, and he just goes, I went to Heartbreak Ridge. And the lieutenant just kind of looks like off in the distance, like, that's not a college, what does he mean by that? And then we get this answer later on in the film about why he said Heartbreak Ridge. The Korean War is a huge headnote that is sprinkled in the film to explain a lot of the characters, and without knowing what they did in the war, but just knowing they were in the Korean War, you can kind of imagine for yourself going, okay, yeah, they probably went to hell and back and lived to tell the story that they probably have a hard time telling. And I found a piece of trivia on IMDb that does confirm there is a tie to the Korean War within this film. The title of Heartbreak Ridge comes from the Korean War's Battle of Heartbreak Ridge, also known as the Battle of Wendiglee. I don't know if I botched that. If I did, I am so sorry. I'm not that good with pronunciation things sometimes. This war was fought between September 13th and October 15th, 1951. So putting that in perspective, this war was in 1951. Heartbreak Ridge came out in 1986. It's a huge echo to the 1950s to talk about that war. There are still some films and TV shows that do mention, like, the Korean War, but I haven't really seen one do it like Heartbreak Ridge did, to actually go so far to pinpoint and echo to that time period and name the whole film after the war. So now that we have the title out of the way, I feel like it's time to go ahead and talk about the cast of this film, because you all know by now that is something that I have to do with every episode, to give the credit to the people behind the writers that really brought this film to life. Because if they ever remade Heartbreak Ridge, I have to say it, there's no way in hell you can be able to get another Clint Eastwood or Mario Van Peebles or Eileen Heckart or Moses Gunn. It's impossible. You cannot prove me about that, okay? So getting the first one out of the way, I mean, obviously, we gotta talk about Clint Eastwood playing Thomas Highway. When I watched this film the first couple of times, I wasn't sure how I felt about Thomas Highway, with the fact that he's not the best military character, but he's still a military character. There's been so many characters that Clint Eastwood has played, some that have been overdone and some that weren't done enough, and Thomas Highway has like a perfect blend where I honestly felt that Clint Eastwood being in this film is powerful, but didn't overshadow the others. It might just be me, and that's the way that I saw it, but everyone had like an equal amount of fair time. Even looking at the film with him being kind of shrouded in the dark in the title photo, you do get to see like the recruits in the background. Like, this is the main focal point. He's leading these guys into war. It's not just about the main dude. We got other pawns to think about here. But I also like Thomas Highway for being just an asshole. I know it's not a good thing to constantly bash your subordinates and have to constantly do like a dick measuring contest, but Thomas Highway does it in like the best way possible, where it's not like psychological or manipulative. He is just like shameless, absolutely shameless. He does not mind having to spit something back in someone's face, having absolutely no penitence for the words he said, but you clearly see like he thought this through before he said it. And there's the perfect evidence within the beginning of the film that I'm going to read to you. So I'm going to paint the picture for you the best way I can. Near the beginning of Heartbreak Ridge, after Highway has been bailed out again, he's leaving the courtroom, and there are two people that are just writing his ass, just telling him how much of an asshole he is. And these are the lines. There's a character named Reese who is saying to him, "Who the hell do you think you are? Pissing on my squad car? You think you can break our rules and then just walk away? Or are we supposed to wet our pants over your dress blues and your goddamn colored ribbons? Take a look at that file of yours sometime, hero. Check the dates. It's ancient fucking history. You know, one of these Saturday nights, you're going to be puking blood in some alley, and you're going to look up and see me standing there. Then we'll see." And Highway says, "Keep dreaming, shitball." And the other guy comes back and says, "You're going to pay full price, rummy. I don't believe in no servicemen's discounts." And then the ultimate insult had been made when Highway says, "Too bad your old lady does." And Reese is about to like pummel onto Highway. And like that alone, that's your introduction. This is the person that you're supposed to root for. This is technically your hero. And he just said the most insult of like a yo mama joke to someone. Like, shit, the man, like, he does not mind having to say such, like, foul things. And I do love a character like that. Hell, I've written characters like that for my book series Inglorious Inc. The man is not afraid to have to tell someone off, but he is a man of, like, all honesty. I would say it's the best way to, like, phrase up his character is that everything he says is just pure honesty. There's a part in the film that I love where there is a accidental spray of bullets that happens from one of the guns that is shot by one of the recruits as a complete accident, but unfortunately accidents in the military have to be taken as a punishment. I'm not really all knowledgeable about the military, like I said, but discipline has to happen to get it across, hey, when you're on there, you can't just have an accident. And so this recruit has to run around in a circle around his recruits as they're walking back to the camp, and the guy just finally collapses. He is just exhausted from having to run around. And Highway gets down and just says, "Don't give the prick the satisfaction." And what does the recruit do? He just screams like a Valhalla Viking scream and just like goes up, and it like invigorates him, and he finds energy he never knew he had before. Like, Highway uplifted his own recruit without having to say something detrimental or flat out insulting. And we've seen him be an insulting character, but he only does it for people that deserve being insulted. And Highway is asked what he said to his recruit to make him get up, and he's honest. He just flat out said to this man's face, "I said, don't give the prick the satisfaction, sir." Basically saying, I will help my recruits to be the best man, but they're going to be men of honor, and they are not going to let people get to them. I'm going to give them the thick skin that they need to have to get through here. And just, I kind of love those certain layers to his character. I could honestly go on and on about Highway, but I gotta have to save the good stuff for later on in the film. This next character I can only describe as the perfect whiny character. When Stitch Jones appears in the film, he is the perfect foil to Highway, but also a perfect parallel to Highway too. And I do have to say, and you know, I'm kind of ashamed to say this, the way that Stitch Jones is in this film, it almost rivals Clint Eastwood's Thomas Highway. It is such a standout character that you have a hard-ass character, and then you have a hard-headed character that has a little bit more pizzazz, a little bit more enthusiasm. He's kind of like a very toned up Robert Downey Jr. Like, he's got a quick quip to say for everything. He loves the danger. He loves the excitement. He is not afraid to put himself into a certain situation in a bar. And it does kind of make sense that he would go on to be a Marine where he would be in the same environment, but having to kind of change the game on how he's going to emotionally react to it and see how he's going to get through it. I do love the way that kind of pans out that you do have a character that is suited for the military, but you have to see him drop the tough guy shit long enough to see him really show his colors and become one of the comrades. But I also love Stitch Jones for the fact that he's the perfect whiny character. When we have whiny characters, they're just, I don't want to do this, I don't like that, blah, blah, blah. You have to put some kind of like comedic edge to it so you know they're gonna grow up. We know Stitch Jones is in for a rude awakening, but the fact that a lot of the majority of stuff that he reacts to with the comrades, Highway, stuff at bars, other stuff with Highway, it is kind of realistically portrayed that I would probably say something along the lines that Stitch Jones said, where he just goes, "Oh my god, I want my mama!" And it's just comedy gold with everything that Mario Van Peebles put into this character. You know you have a whiny character done right when you're laughing at him when he's whining and don't feel like this character is a wimp, that it's just, you got the short end of the stick and you're trying to find a way around it. And man, it is hilarious the way that he keeps trying to come up with different schemes to see how he can get rid of Highway. But there's also an emotional element that I love with Stitch Jones. As much as I've seen his character clearly look out for himself, he was not afraid to have to abandon Thomas Highway in a busport before he knew who the fuck he was, that it was going to be his eventual sergeant in the Marine Corps. But there are certain ways you can tell by his character that he's had to learn to take care of himself. Do you think he would take care of others? It's a little questionable. There's a part in the film that I love where a character named Aponte is not seen again. And the first thing he says is, "He's sick, Sergeant. He's sick, man." And over time, like, Highway lets the lie ride, and then he comes back to Stitch to say, "Alright, fess up, where is he?" And Stitch Jones just continues to say, "I'm not going to tell you." Like, that goes a long way. He is dismissing the command of a high officer to protect his comrade. If that ain't camaraderie, I don't know what is. And that's coming from a character like Stitch Jones that we've seen do selfish acts or do some buffoonery, but you actually see him come through for someone to know the situation of Aponte and know, okay, I gotta protect this guy. And he doesn't hesitate to do it. That's definitely a quality to have in the Marines. For someone like him that's selfish, yet when you're in the Marines, you give your life, you give everything to your country and your comrades. It's definitely an act of patriotism that doesn't really get noticed, but it's one that was like, you blink or squint and you can kind of see, alright, yeah, I can definitely see that being a good act of like camaraderie, and Stitch Jones is in the right place. But before I move on to other characters, I do have to mention my favorite line that he says within the film, which is, "Don't start no SH, there won't be no IT." I need that for a bumper sticker, a tattoo, and on my grave. I mean, it's what I would want. So for a complete change of pace, we're going from a comedic character to a very sweet character. The character of Little Mary Jackson is so wholesome that it literally brings tears to my eyes when I see her character on the screen. I feel so much just from the way she looks at Thomas Highway with this affection given to a man that is such a fucking asshole. But there's something about the way she hugs him knowing, okay, well fuck. If she stares at him the way that she's seen an old friend without any hesitation to throw her arms up and give him like a big ass hug, then it's like, okay, damn, there's something about him that we don't know about, and somehow she's the reason why he's not as bad as we thought he was. I absolutely love the way that she talks about being a Marine's wife, that Thomas Highway goes on to say that he said, not many people can handle being a Marine's wife, and she goes, Panther piss. My best years of my life was with a Marine. If I was younger, I'd make you eat your words and curl your toes. And I'm like, that's the best fucking line I ever heard in my life. I'm telling you, the writing was done by a robot. Everything's too good. My first introduction to Eileen Heckart was in the film The First Wives Club, which ironically was her last film before her retirement. And then down the line, I found her in Heartbreak Ridge, and I was like, oh my god, it's the hard-headed, stubborn mom from The First Wives Club. And during the summer, I got to see her in one of her earlier films when I covered The Bad Seed with my friend Ann Lowe. And the entire time I was watching The Bad Seed, I thought about her in Heartbreak Ridge. I still found the same emotion that was there, that she always brought 110% into a character that you really felt like you knew. So one thing I always love about Eileen Heckart is that everything she always played felt like someone that you knew in your personal life or someone that you used to know. It's a thing that we don't really have too common these days, and Eileen Heckart gave us some of the best performances in cinema history. I just have to say it. There's a reason why this woman is known for a majority of the films I just mentioned. It makes me wish that she had more time on screen because I want more of her. Every time I see her hug Clint Eastwood's character, I felt that hug. But also with the same full circle that I mentioned earlier with Stitch Jones, Little Mary has such a huge part to play in this film without her being present. Her deceased husband said the infamous line for the film, "If this don't kill us, it'll break our hearts." Her husband, Stoney Jackson, said that. And when I was like, oh my god, that's her husband said the line that really makes up a majority of this film. It's kind of a powerful thing knowing she is kind of a part of the grand scheme of how this whole story works. So the next female character that I want to give a special spotlight to is, well, the woman that constantly still puts Thomas Highway in disarray, Aggie. A majority of this film does have two sides to it. There's the side where you have to see Thomas Highway succeed to turn deadbeats into brilliant Marines and whatever it is that he's trying to do to reconcile with his ex-wife. There's something still there between his ex-wife and him, but she's done with it. I love this woman for being a very well-written female character. Most of the times whenever there is a female character written by a man, that can be like, is it going to be a good representation? But no, she was really given a good voice of like, what the fuck do you think you're doing here? Do you really think I'm going to come back with you after everything I went through? Like, there is a lot of anger and layers in there, and they're rightful angry layers that she has. It is one of the most spot-on things I've ever seen for the depiction of a military wife, or a former military wife in this case, to see her finally break down in tears and finally tell her ex-husband what it felt like to be a Marine's wife, that it wasn't like the pressure, but it was the fear. She said to him tearfully that she hated the fact that there were times that she would be glued to the TV screen to see if there was like any new news about what was going on during the war, and that she said, I hoped I wouldn't see your dead body on the screen, but I was scared and wondering if you were dead out there and I didn't know. I didn't know when you were coming home. I sat there with such paranoia and guilt and fear. And she just breaks down to it, and Thomas Highway says no shit. There is nothing he can say to that, because he didn't know how she felt. There's no way of saying I'm sorry to like make up for that. She signed on to be a wife, but sometimes the heart can only take what it can take with what happens when you fear for someone that you love, that sometimes you have to walk away because of what's better for yourself. That's such a strong echo to today, where you think about your mental health more as much as you love someone, but if you know you're being put through hell over and over and over again, you know it's just going to keep killing your insides. On the outside, she was a military wife, but on the inside, she was a wreck for having to constantly worry about her husband, and she made the choice to not put herself through it. It is the strongest decision that you can make for yourself, that as much as you love someone, you can't keep putting yourself through hell over and over and over again. Back then, it was seen as something selfish, like, oh, come on, you gotta stand by your man, you have to be there for him. Well, until you're in their shoes, it's something disrespectful to say to someone that has to go through that. It's like, well, then you sit there and you watch a television screen and you see if you can find your dead husband on screen, and then we'll talk. It's such a powerful echo for characters that's created with Aggie, that echoes to people of today that have to make the hard decision. And now, today, it's not considered selfish to want to do the best thing for yourself, even if that means you can't be with someone that you really love, because you can't just keep doing this. You can't really sacrifice so much and still say that, like, it's love, because it's a scary type of feeling to know what you signed up for, and if you can't take it, you gotta get out of it. And she did. She did the right thing for herself and kind of the right thing for Highway as well. And even he had to just bite his tongue and realize that he never knew how she felt being the wife of a Marine. That it wasn't just she couldn't handle it, of the pressure of it. It was, like I said, she couldn't handle the fear of it. And the last thing I want to talk about, it's not really a special character, but I felt like I couldn't not say it for how hysterical it was. There's been a character mentioned in this film named Swede, who is supposed to be the be-all, end-all of saving graces to the platoon that is trying to get rid of Highway. And it's this big, huge, buff, brawn dude they call Swede. And, well, I don't have to spoil it for you, but I think it speaks for itself that Swede doesn't really get the upper hand on Highway. But I do find it absolutely hysterical to find out that the guy who plays Swede was in the NFL. He was a former first-round draft pick of the Cincinnati Bengals and All-American defensive end at University of Maryland. So I'm like, okay, this guy definitely came from somewhere. But I do love the fact that there is a very strange tie to the NFL because of this movie. Honestly, this character gives me an excuse to say that I know the military and sports. Two things that I know a little bit about, but at least a little bit I have counts. But as much as this film has great heart and has a great cast, the movie itself does have, like, one weird flaw that has been seen by many Marines, and most of them just scratch their heads and they just go, why did they do that? So, Heartbreak Ridge takes place in North Carolina. They mention Camp Lejeune, they say they're in Camp Lejeune, but when you watch their training sequences in Camp Lejeune, there are mountains. There are no mountains in or near Camp Lejeune. I found this out through a video that I was watching on YouTube from the GQ channel called U.S. Marine Breaks Down Military Movies, and I can put a link for it in the description box. It is a little awkward to watch the movie knowing that they couldn't find someplace else that had the same terrain as North Carolina. Like, I'm not really a geographer, I wouldn't really know a lot of areas, but I don't think it would be that hard to find someplace that looks at least somewhat similar to Camp Lejeune. And not having something like a mountain clearly in the background that shows, yeah, this is a false depiction of Camp Lejeune. But to be fair, I'm not in the director's shoes. I don't know what Clint Eastwood had to do to make this film possible. I don't know why all of a sudden they decided to keep things in California instead of going all the way to North Carolina to film everything, so at least you feel that you're in the area of where Camp Lejeune is at. But again, executive decisions were made. He did what he had to do. It does stay like a sore thumb, but thankfully there hasn't been an issue like that since then. And unfortunately, Heartbreak Ridge does serve as an example of, if you're gonna make a film about Camp Lejeune, don't do Heartbreak Ridge and have a mountain in the background. So I have one last story to share about Heartbreak Ridge. And it's honestly one of my favorite stories that I would not expect to be an actual true story from this film. Like I said earlier, a majority of this film works its way to show what happened in the Korean War by utilizing some of the stories and creative liberties, like the title itself comes from the Korean War. But there is a scene that does have precedence over a real event that happened in one of the operations. Near the end of the movie, when Highway and the lieutenant are trying to get a call through back to base so they can be able to get some help coming through, they need a credit card. Of all the times in dire situations, they need a piece of plastic to save the day. And who saves the day but Stitch Jones, that says, "I never go anywhere without it." And that is actually true. There is something that happened in Operation Urgent Fury Grenada Action. A U.S. Navy SEAL rescuing the Governor General placed a calling card to SOCOM, which brought an AC-130 gunship to bear on an APC that was firing on them. Now every time I look at that scene about the credit card, it changes the way I look at it, knowing that that is actually based off of a true story. Of everything else in the film, the title does have certain derivement from the real war, as well as just making its own nod to the war, but then you have a moment like that that isn't really well known, and it has a place in this film. And that's about a wrap on Heartbreak Ridge. There's a lot more I could go into, but I honestly don't want to say anymore for those that haven't seen the film. This is honestly one of those films that I can't reiterate everything, because some of these things are so genuine that you just have to hear it for yourself. This isn't one of those films that it's going to make you go, oh, I gotta watch this over and over and over again. Like, even yours truly, I've only seen this film a handful of times, but it's so memorable that it makes me want to go back to it. It's not the be-all, end-all of Clint Eastwood films, but it is a good vintage Clint Eastwood film to see him in his prime and what he brought to a lot of cinema, and it's not a bad war film. It's a mishmash of different types of movies put together, but doesn't feel like it's overtaxing anybody, and it's enjoyable to go through a film where you can laugh and cry and grit your teeth and get to a happy ending, and that's a movie done right if it's able to make you go through all those emotions and still make you want to go back to it. And with that said, that is officially a wrap on Heartbreak Ridge. Now, I have something to say that is not related to my show, but this is something very important to me that I want to share. There is a local open mic night that I go to, and I mention open mic nights a lot on the Screen Queen. A friend of mine named Alex is the host of a radio station in my area of Virginia, and I'll put all the information in the description box because I can't think on top of my head, and I'd rather have the information be accurate than me saying it right now. But I talked with him and the owner of the Captain's Den, the place that open mic night takes place, and they've been thinking of some different ways to get everything moving and grooving to show more awareness for an open mic night that is very, very good. I love going there every Tuesday and getting to meet up with certain people and get to know more creatives out there. So if you are in the Virginia area and you're looking for an open mic night that's in the Newport News area, please come to the Captain's Den. They have an open mic night that is on a Tuesday. It alternates depending on the schedules, but you won't be disappointed. There are so many great acts that come through there. Like, eventually I'm going to see these people on an album record. I shit you not. There are so many talented people, and I get to just sit there and get the stardust that's gleaming off of all of them. And they did not pay me to do this. I had offered this because I love everyone there. They've been so good to me, and I want to be able to help them out by giving them a shout out on this show. And if you would like to have more information about that, you can find that in the description box. And now on to the rest of the Screen Queen show. So, with the schedule now with the Screen Queen, there is going to be a trailer time episode next Thursday. Next Thursday is Thanksgiving. But I will still manage to have it somewhere around there in the madness of the holiday. I will deliver the goods, and I have a very interesting episode that I have planned for trailer time. But I will deliver the goods and what the next episode of the Screen Queen is going to be. So with this episode coming out for the last Sunday in November, we are going to be diving into the Christmas series on the Screen Queen. This will be the second year of doing the Christmas series. I just sat aside my Christmas selections, and I have no idea what is in here. I threw some new ones together, so we're about to find out what the first episode of the Christmas series is going to be. So let me get this mixed up really good. Okay. Alright, let me see here. I got one. Yep, I got one. Of course. Just, I knew it. I'm not bummed. I'm just, the coincidence is just shocking. So, the first episode of the Christmas series on the Screen Queen is going to be Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas. I know a majority of you probably just screamed at that, and even though I can't hear it right now, but I know if I hear a scream somewhere, I'm like, oh, they just found out that Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas is going to be on the Screen Queen. I know it was such a popular movie, and, well, that's going to be interesting to get into when the Christmas series begin next month. So thank you so much for being here. If you'd like to catch up with me in between uploads, you can find me on my Instagram at the Queen of the Screen, where I post up behind the scenes and I give some future scoops on what's going to be happening. If you want to talk to me about Heartbreak Ridge, you can find me on there. If you want to see some funny movie-related content that I post up, you can find me on my TikTok at The Mystical Space Witch. And if you're interested in the book series that I wrote, you can also find that in the description box. Until then, I've been your Screen Queen. Thank you so much for being here. And if you served our country, thank you for your service. You all take care now and stay amazing. Godspeed. This is your Screen Queen signing off. Bye-bye.